I knew shit was sideways the second Darren called an impromptu alignment meeting and booked the glass conference room, the one with zero sound insulation and prime visibility for office vultures to circle. I walked in, coffee still half full, expecting maybe another redundant policy memo or some passive-aggressive jab about my workflow pacing. Instead, Darren was already seated, tie loosened like he was trying to channel some laid-back Silicon Valley genius. Spoiler: he looked more like a hungover realtor who just got dumped by his own client. "Thanks for joining on short notice," he said, not even looking up from his tablet. "Let's keep this short. Effective today, you're being repositioned to records, basement level. It's part of a larger strategy to," he paused for dramatic effect, "optimize information flow." Translation: they were shoving me out of sight, under the humming fluorescence and next to the old vending machine that only dispensed off-brand diet soda and stale Kit Kats. A few chuckles broke out from the peanut gallery outside the door. I spotted Lisa from HR pretending to sip coffee while she leaned a little too conveniently close to the glass. And Todd, freaking Todd, actually fist-bumped someone. Cute. Real subtle, guys. But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. Hell, I barely breathed. I just stared at Darren's smug little face and said, dead calm, "Perfect, because as soon as you sign that form, this firm owes me $60 million bucks." You could have heard a stapler hit carpet. Darren froze, pen hovering midair. The HR lady outside actually dropped her mug. The silence wasn't awkward, it was surgical. I let it sit, let it marinate. Oh, by the way, if you're listening right now and haven't hit subscribe yet, what the hell are you doing? 97% of you ghost me like my ex after tax season. Hit the damn button. Like the video. Help the team keep digging up stories corporate would rather bury. Now back to the fun part. Darren blinked twice like his contact lenses were buffering. "Excuse me?" I leaned forward just slightly. "Clause 42D. You just triggered it. It's in the retention bylaws. You do read those, right?" His lips parted like he was about to say something. Maybe call bluff, maybe stall. But his hand had already finished the signature stroke before his brain caught up. That's the thing about corporate theater. Once the form's signed, the scene is locked. I stood up slow, adjusted my coat, reached into my bag, pulled out a plain manila envelope, slid it across the table. Inside, a copy of the original employee trust assignment from 2009, stamped and notarized. Legalese so dry it could start a wildfire, but with one juicy detail: any demotion in title without cause activated a dormant transfer of equity rights held in a holding vehicle known, poetically, as Oaktree Asset Trust. Value: $60 million. What even is Clause 42D? Darren croaked, suddenly sweating like he'd swallowed a stapler sideways. I smiled, just enough to make it weird. "It's the part you skipped." Then, because I'm nothing if not thorough, I pulled out my phone and dialed. Speaker on. "First National Holdings," a crisp voice answered. "Yes, this is Raymond Carson," I said, loud enough for the hallway to hear. "Please initiate the Clause 42D ownership verification sequence." The reassignment form was signed at 10:43 a.m. "Yes, Mr. Carson. Processing." I ended the call, tucked my phone back into my coat, walked past the glass wall, past the hushed whispers and wide eyes and that sweet moment when Lisa from HR actually stepped back like I was radioactive. I didn't run. I didn't gloat. I just walked straight to the elevator, thumbed the button for the basement, because that was the final keystroke, and they had no idea what door they just opened. Darren clicked his pen like he was closing a deal, not signing a corporate death warrant. "Well then," he said with a forced smile, scribbling his name like he was about to get a trophy for it, "let's call this strategic realignment." He even underlined it twice. Fancied himself clever, that one. I watched the ink dry. No fanfare. No panic. Just a quiet moment where the universe exhaled through the buzzing AC vent above us. Then I turned on my heel, walked out the door, and made my call. Same calm voice I used when ordering printer toner. Only this time it wasn't ink I was activating. It was a chain reaction. "Yes, this is Raymond Carson," I said, loud enough that Todd from compliance paused mid-waddle. "Clause 42D just triggered. Please initiate the ownership verification sequence. Pause on the line. Then a clipped, practiced reply. Confirmed, Mr. Carson. Activating now. I hung up. Didn't need to say more. The hallway had gone so still you could hear the janitor down the corridor chewing his sandwich. I didn't stick around to answer questions. Let them wonder. Let the silence scream louder than I ever could. I took the stairs instead of the elevator. Gave me more time to think. And with each step, the past started to unspool like some grim little reel I hadn't watched in years. Financial collapse tore through us like termites through drywall. I was still just that quiet lady from archives. Married, hopeful, naive enough to think that hard work bought safety. I just lost my husband, heart attack at 43. He left behind more medical bills than memories. So I buried my grief in ledgers and restructuring memos. That's when they came to me, said they needed someone quiet to assist with offloading distressed assets. Shell companies with expired registrations, burnt-up tax shields, half-dead subsidiaries in weird jurisdictions. I didn't ask questions. I asked for authority access. They gave it. What they didn't realize was that in the chaos, I rewrote one of the dormant entities, Oaktree Asset Trust, into a trigger-bound equity vault. Clause 42D was born in that smog-choked office, late at night, between my third energy drink and a 10-hour spreadsheet dive. I embedded the clause deep. Legal review rubber-stamped it. 3 CFOs signed off over the years. No one ever revoked it. Why would they? I was just the records chick. But Clause 42D was crystal clear. Any involuntary title reassignment not accompanied by an equal or superior elevation in scope shall convert retained beneficiary rights into active equity under dormant vehicle OET 42D. In normal human language, shove me into the basement and I own your damn lungs. And today they shoved. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot, sloppy, reckless. This was precision. This was 16 years of patience sharpening to a needlepoint. All I ever needed was a signature. And Darren, bless his stupid heart, gave me a flourish. By the time I reached the basement door, the building was already reacting. You could feel the change in the air, the electric static of panic trying to stay dressed in business casual. I swiped into records, sat down at my desk like nothing had happened, logged in, and watched the first automated ownership ping hit the internal ledger. Line 1, beneficial transfer pending. Recipient, Carson R. Trigger, 42D. Amount, $60 million. Status, awaiting verification. The fuse was lit, and no one up there had a clue what was about to burn. Legal got the email at 11:07 a.m. Subject line, verification of trust transition, beneficiary Carson, R. At first, the junior associate flagged it as phishing. Cayman Islands domain? Weird formatting? Looked shady. Probably just some prince offering billions for help wiring money out of a war zone. But then the CFO walked by, coffee in hand, bored and nosy, and peeked over her shoulder. "Let me see that," he muttered. He scrolled. Then he stopped scrolling. Then he stopped blinking. The entire email was a formal notice from Royal Trust and Financials, a legitimate offshore fiduciary bank that had handled legacy asset shelters for the firm back during the post-crash fire sale era. The trust in question was labeled OAT 42D, listed under dormant but verified internal vehicles. Total assets? $60 million. Beneficiary? Carson, Raymond. A senior beneficiary trigger clause had been activated, and the trust would begin preliminary ownership transition pending final confirmations. The paper trail traced back over a decade, notarized, time-stamped, co-signed by people who had long since taken golden parachutes or evaporated into consultant gigs. The CFO stared at it, color draining. "Why the hell is his name on this?" he said out loud, even though no one had asked anything. He marched down the corridor to Legal's war room, slammed the door behind him, and shouted for compliance. That's when the real unraveling began. The email triggered an internal ledger crawl. Someone in IT flagged a user access pattern change. Mine. The same hour I was relocated, The dormant database access keyed open and began auto-pulling audit files related to old trust structures. The CIO popped in mid-sandwich bite asking, "Did someone just wake the archive servers?" Compliance said nothing at first. Then one of them pulled up a copy of the Retention Policy Handbook from 2009. Quietly flipped to a subsection nobody had looked at in years. There it was. Clause 42D. Smack in the middle of a section labeled Title Demotion Safeguards. They always thought it was metaphor, or a placeholder, or some dusty procedural fluff added during the restructuring blitz when everyone was too busy covering their own asses to read the fine print. But now they were reading it. Out loud, slowly, together, and the words weren't vague. They were surgical. In the event that a title is diminished without corresponding promotional offset, and no cause is documented, control of the relevant retained assets shall be passed to the named individual, under the express condition of Clause 42D, effective upon documented reassignment. In short, Darren's flourish had just handed me the detonator. And upstairs, they were finally hearing the beeping. Meanwhile, back in the basement, I was sipping peppermint tea. Did I get a call? No. Email? Nope. They were too busy assembling legal triage kits and trying to wrap their heads around the fact that the invisible woman from records had just reached through time and punched them in the damn throat. I didn't need a spotlight. I had the system. The waiting didn't bother me. 14 years I'd played their game, logging every change, every signed memo, every single forgotten clause buried in footnotes no one ever read. They never saw me, but they were about to see what happens when the foundation moves. And the cracks were only just starting to spread. They booked the emergency meeting in the executive boardroom, the one with the overpriced walnut table and a thermostat that always ran cold. Appropriate, considering how fast the temperature in that room dropped once the first slide went up. Legal, finance, compliance, HR. All of them packed in like hungover bridesmaids trying to figure out who crashed the wedding. "Why the hell is his name on this?" the CFO snapped, finger jabbing the projection of the Cayman Trust ledger. His tie was already loosened. His scalp glistened. The compliance officer, a twitchy guy named Brent, cleared his throat and fumbled through the hard copy binder he hadn't touched since 2016. Carson's name appears as the retained beneficiary of OAT 42D, and several sister vehicles spun up during the 2009 restructuring window. The clause in question seems to be a demotion-triggered equity transfer. "Seems to be," the CEO said, not even looking up from his phone, probably texting legal counsel under the table. Brent swallowed. "Is." HR tried to chime in. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe there's a timing issue with the form." No, legal cut her off. The timestamp on Darren's reassignment order matches the activation protocol. It was signed, submitted, and archived by 10:44 a.m., which, according to Clause 42D, is the trigger point. Everyone went quiet for a beat. Then one of the board members, the kind who only shows up when dividends are threatened, leaned in and whispered, "We never revoked those triggers?" That landed like a piano full of bricks. Because no, they hadn't. In the orgy of chaos that was 2009, while they were swapping titles, laundering debt, and burying bad assets in layers of shell companies, they tossed me a stack of corpses and told me to make them look alive. And I had. I restructured, re-registered, reclassified. All with legal oversight. All approved. And while they patted each other on the back for surviving the bloodbath, I was laying quiet landmines underneath the freshly cleaned carpet. One of those landmines was OAT 42D. They assumed retained beneficiary was ceremonial, that a compliance officer's name was as harmless as boilerplate. They didn't notice the footnote that tied it to hostile conversion rights in event of involuntary title diminishment. Translation: "You screw me sideways, I get your wallet." And now they'd handed me the one thing I never had before. Cause, back in the basement, I didn't pace, didn't gloat. I pulled up the digital ledger interface, watched as internal shares began queuing for review, watched as IT logs fluttered to life from exec endpoints, each trying to access legacy systems they'd forgotten existed. One tried to overwrite a permissions table. Too late. The trigger had already deployed. While they scrambled, I clicked open a folder labeled M. Inside it was a subfolder. Maria. Her photos still lived there. Our wedding, the little road trip to Lake Geneva, her half-written novel she never finished because her body gave out before her spirit did. When the markets imploded and took our savings with it, I took a job that offered stability, even if it meant being invisible. She died quietly in 2010. A heart defect no one caught until it was too late. While the board was sipping champagne over a fake rebound quarter, I was alone in a hospice room counting beeps between heart monitors. That night after she passed, I stayed in the office. All night. Didn't cry. Didn't drink. Just read contracts. Hundreds of them. Looking for something. Some way to make meaning out of the nothing we were left with. And I found it. Not justice. Not revenge. Leverage. Maria always said I hid too much behind systems. She wasn't wrong. But now, her name was quietly encrypted into the trustee records of the same vehicle they laughed off as tax debris. So when they whispered, "Why the hell is his name on this?" The real answer? Because I put it there. And they were the ones who pulled the pin. The email landed in my inbox at 6:13 a.m. Subject line, "Urgent, clarification meeting request." Like hell they wanted clarity. They wanted containment. Cleanup. A leash. I showed up at 8 o'clock sharp, calm as ever, carrying a slim, black leather folio I hadn't touched in 5 years. No coffee, no chatter, just paperwork and posture. The boardroom smelled like fear and stale cologne. Darren was already in there, hunched over, red-eyed, whispering to Brent from compliance like two kids caught hot-wiring the family car. Legal counsel sat near the window, pale and already sweating through her blouse. The CEO tried to keep things breezy. "Ray," he said, forced smile twitching. "We just want to clear up a few inconsistencies." I sat, placed the folio down with precision, opened it. "I anticipated this," I said flatly, sliding out a series of original documents, each sheathed in plastic, dated, notarized, cross-signed. Clause 42D was embedded in the OAT Trust framework and reviewed in full during the 2009, 2012, and 2016 audits. Legal reviews signed by CFO Martinez, CFO Green, and Interim Controller Farkas. I laid the pages out like playing cards. Darren leaned in to squint, then jerked back like he'd just read his own autopsy report. He stammered, This is manipulation. This is fraud." I met his eyes for the first time all morning. Cold. Even. No. Fraud requires deception. This was all above board. You signed the trigger. I followed the clause. Legal reached for the documents with shaky hands, glancing at the timestamps, the embedded version metadata, the original PDFs logged in our own archive system. I knew the drill. I'd built the drill. "I'm not asking for anything," I said calmly. "You activated the clause. This is automatic enforcement. I'm simply following internal policy." You'd think that would be the moment someone raised their voice, slammed a fist, threatened litigation. Nope. That honor went to Ellen, the firm's in-house counsel. 23 years in, 6 figures in student loans still festering under the surface. A woman so tightly wound she once color-coded the fire escape plan. She looked at the final page. My trustee declaration, signed off in 2016 by 2 now-retired VPs, and gagged into the nearest trash bin. Full body, guttural, the kind of reaction usually reserved for crime scenes or public speaking. HR rushed over with tissues like that would mop up the fact that the firm had just legally transferred $60 million in trust equity to the woman they relocated beneath a broken HVAC unit and next to the janitor's closet. Darren tried to keep flailing. "We will issue a freeze order," he said. "This is being disputed and..." I held up one hand. "Please consult the dispute timeline listed in Section 6 of the Trustee Charter. You have 30 days to review, but trust control transitions instantly pending rebuttal." Which, given that the original documents were never revoked, puts the burden of proof on you. Silence again. Not the stunned kind this time. The resigned kind. The kind that creeps into rooms when everyone realizes they're in a car rolling downhill with the brakes already cut. The CO exhaled, long and slow, like he was deflating in his own chair. and I just gathered my papers, slid them back into the folio, zipped it shut. No anger, no joy, just the quiet click of inevitability. You all assumed I was some dusty little fixture in the records room, I said as I stood. But the thing about records is they don't forget, they don't flinch, and they don't lose court cases. No one followed me out of the room. Even Darren just slumped forward, mumbling something about over my dead body, which honestly sounded more like a wish than a threat. By the time I got back downstairs, a new alert had hit the internal dashboard. OAT 42D ownership status. Verified. Active. Irrevocable. Beneficial trustee Carson, R. Conversion level, full. I refreshed the page once. Watched the value tick up by a few thousand in market adjustment. They tried to bury it, but I filed it, and now it was alive. The leak was surgical, like someone snuck into the server room with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. The headline hit Bloomberg at 9:46 a.m. Equity turmoil at Marwick Sloan. Internal trust trigger sparks control dispute. That was all it took. The emails started within the hour. First from minority investors, then portfolio managers, then the SEC's Assistant Director of Legacy Compliance Systems. By lunchtime, 3 of our institutional partners had quietly suspended reinvestment talks. By 2 p.m., Reuters picked it up. By 3:15, the internal Slack channel had devolved into a digital riot. Someone in HR actually sent out a company-wide reminder. Please remember that public speculation may violate your NDAs. Like that was gonna plug the dam after the flood had already washed through. And Darren? He was out. The CEO made the call around 5:30. After a board meeting where one of the old guard allegedly slammed his cane on the table and demanded to know why the janitor owns more voting shares than the goddamn founder's grandson. They called it temporary suspension of managerial authority pending outcome of internal audit. Translation: go home, Darren, and maybe don't come back. I didn't gloat. I simply marked the event in a spreadsheet titled Cascade Logs and moved on to the next row. At 6:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown caller, no ID. I answered without saying a word. Ray, said a voice forced calm. It's Harold. Do you have a moment? The CEO never used my name before. I was always her. Records. That lady in the corner. Now it was Ray. Like we were old friends sipping scotch and swapping war stories instead of me sitting in the skeleton of a filing department while his empire hemorrhaged trust. I'd like to talk, he continued. Off the record. I told him to meet me in the old contract review room on level 3. The one with no cameras. Just a dusty ficus and a broken wall clock stuck at 11:11. He arrived 15 minutes later. No tie, collar askew. The whites of his eyes raw. He'd aged 6 years in 6 days. Let's be honest, he said, settling across from me. This thing, it's gotten out of hand. The scaring the partners. You and I both know there's a solution here. I said nothing. He leaned in, elbows on the table like he was negotiating a hostage release. What if we make you whole financially? We acknowledge the oversight, grant you a fair package. You step away, we move forward. Clean, quiet, respectful. I reached into my bag and handed him a single sheet of paper. He blinked. What's this? My price. He read it. Eyes flicked over the bullet points. Expression didn't shift, except for the little twitch at his jawline when he reached the final line. Or you can go public and explain to the press, the partners, and the auditors why the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar firm never read his own retention agreements. Silence. Jesus, he muttered. No, I replied. Just records. He chuckled once, bitter, thin. The kind of laugh people do when they realize they brought a garden hose to a forest fire. You've had this waiting, haven't you? Since 2010. He looked up at me then, and I knew what he saw. Not the office ghost. Not the forgotten paper pusher. But the fault line. I was no longer the woman buried in records. I was the fuse, and his building was already burning. The vote wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no pounding of fists. Just a long, sterile silence broken by the dull thud of pens meeting paper. 7 signatures. 2 abstentions. 1 face-pale CEO staring a hole into the mahogany boardroom table like it might open and swallow him whole. I sat at the far end, same side chair I used to occupy during retention audits. Back when I wasn't invited to speak, only to listen and record minutes they'd never read. This time, no one made eye contact. No polite corporate nods. Just the soft squeak of leather chairs shifting under the weight of surrender. The board had approved it. They didn't even bother dressing it up with jargon. No realignment language. No equity redistribution. They called it what it was. An uncontested transfer of control for the OAT-42D trust vehicle, along with all attached equity stakes in its subsidiary holdings, which included, of course, the firm's most unsexy but deeply valuable spine, records and retention. The division I had rebuilt from skeleton crew to indispensable infrastructure. The department they joked about over cocktails, never realizing it held the locks to every compliance gate, every client signature archive, every financial timestamp that could cripple a merger or stall an audit. They gave me that division outright, which meant I didn't just own a fat block of shares. I owned the skeleton key to the entire machine. The final paperwork came through in an envelope hand-delivered by Brent from compliance. He couldn't even look me in the eye as he passed it off. Inside, certificate of transfer, updated ledger printout, legal attestation, and a copy of the new board register with a single line under Beneficial Trust Holder, OAT 42D. Carson R. Full authority/irrevocable control. I didn't smile. I went back downstairs, sat at my desk, and opened the master control sheet labeled 42D_init_master. Cell F12. Status, pending. I updated it to active, clicked save, closed the file. Then I reached into the bottom drawer and pulled out a folded paper I'd kept there for a decade. A checklist. Handwritten, faded from time and smudged from fingerprints. The last item read, execute only when demoted without cause. I checked the box. Upstairs, word spread fast. They kept it internal, of course, but gossip travels through an office faster than any memo. By lunch, the interns were whispering like I'd just assassinated someone in broad daylight with a stapler. Darren didn't show up that day, or the next. Officially, he was reassigned to a restructuring role overseas. Unofficially, he'd been escorted out of the building with a severance packet smaller than my old monthly toner budget. I got a calendar invite for his farewell Zoom. Declined it. No farewell. No speech. Just a quiet notification that he no longer had system access. And that was it. No confetti. No champagne. Just my old desk. The same chair. Same monitor. The only thing new was the small metal plaque they'd bolted to the door without telling me. Division Head, Records and Retention. Carson. I stared at it for a while. Then I opened a new folder. Labeled it Restructure_phase, because it wasn't over. It was just finally mine. The foundation charter was only 11 pages long. I wrote most of it at night, alone in my apartment, a place that still smelled faintly of peppermint and lavender. Maria's favorite tea, her favorite lotion. Her memory was in the walls, in the unfinished novel on the bookshelf, in the old receipt still taped to the fridge from our first weekend away in Nashville. Steakhouse, 2009. 2 entrees, 1 dessert, and a bottle of wine we couldn't afford. I named it the Maria Carson Trust Foundation. Not flashy. No sleek branding, no tech-laced mission statement. Just one quiet purpose: preservation of ethical accountability in corporate governance, enforced through shareholder control and proxy vote transparency. It sounded boring. It was deadly, because when I transferred the OAT-42D equity into the foundation and structured it to reinvest dividends into compliance initiatives and ethical audits, it triggered a cascading proxy restructure, which meant Maria's name now appeared on every voting ledger. Her initials, her foundation, her mission, and with the final equity tally tallied, Maria Carson Trust Foundation now owned 31.4% of the firm's total voting power. The next highest? 11.7%. There was no contest, no room to maneuver. Control wasn't seized. It was earned in silence, in spreadsheets, in clauses nobody read. The final board meeting was held in the North Conference Room. I walked in at exactly 10 a.m., not late, not early, just on time. I wore black slacks, a navy blazer, and no expression. HR had cleared my former employee badge days ago. Now, I wore a visitor's pass with the title, Trustee, MCTF Holdings. The room was already tense. The CFO sat stone still, hands folded like he was preparing to confess to a priest. Legal glanced at me once and looked away, face pale. A couple board members offered half-hearted nods. Most didn't even look up. The chair tried to open with pleasantries. We're here to discuss the Foundation's shareholder priorities moving forward. I slid a folder across the table. Inside, 10 bullet points, ethics revisions, whistleblower protections, rebalancing of compliance authority, no more restructuring of departments without dual committee sign-off, and a clause requiring full disclosure of all employee retention agreements, past and future. Nobody said no. Nobody could. And Darren? Not there. Not invited. His name was now just a redacted line on a past expense report, filed somewhere deep in the system under terminated personnel, non-returnable. I didn't mention him. I didn't need to. He was a footnote now. The board voted. 9 in favor. 1 abstention. My abstention. Not because I didn't believe in the agenda I wrote it, but because it was never about me. Maria always believed in accountability, in structure, in quiet consequence. She didn't believe in revenge. She believed in justice that walked slow and carried paperwork. And now her name sat atop every motion passed, every vote cast, every audit filed. I stayed until the meeting ended, then stood, nodded once, and left without fanfare. I didn't keep the money. I gave it structure, because real power isn't loud. It isn't cruel. And it sure as hell doesn't need a seat at the head of the table. It just needs documentation, and memory, and enough patience to outlive the ones who laughed when you took the stairs to the basement. The room hadn't changed. Same flickering bulb in the back corner. Same water stain on the ceiling tile shaped vaguely like Arkansas. Same beige file cabinets humming like forgotten tombstones. The janitor had finally fixed the vent, though, so it no longer wheezed like a dying accordion. Small miracles. I sat in the same chair I'd occupied for over 2 decades. A little more scuffed now, but so was I. On the wall above the filing cabinet, where I used to hang that passive-aggressive, "Please don't leave dishes in the sink" poster, I'd mounted something else. A copy of Darren's reassignment form. Framed. Black matte. Museum glass. Underneath it, engraved in small, brushed steel lettering. Clause 42D activated, April 4th. 10:44 a.m. Some people hang diplomas. I prefer cautionary tales. I reached into the top drawer and pulled out a burner phone. No contacts. No apps. Just one number in the call log. I tapped it. The speaker crackled once. Then a crisp voice picked up. "Royal Trust and Financials. This is Olivia." "Yes, this is Raymond Carson," I said, tone as even as it had been the first time. "Please proceed with the final trust transition per the scheduled directives." Pause. Clicking of a keyboard. Then, "Confirmed, Mr. Carson. Beneficiary conversion to Legacy Foundation status is complete. All holdings updated. Congratulations." I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. I hung up. Let the dial tone linger in the air like incense. The silence afterward was its own kind of music. Outside the door, the office buzzed along. Phones ringing, interns scrambling, someone cursing at a printer jam. They had no idea what just finalized in the room below their pay grade, which was fitting. They never knew what I really did down here. Never asked. Never read. The folders in these cabinets had outlived a dozen executives, 3 failed mergers, 1 class action lawsuit, and the entire short-lived paperless initiative that crashed the server for a week. This room, this quiet graveyard of records, had always been dismissed, until it wasn't. I leaned back, let the chair creak once, slow and full. On the desk sat a fresh notepad. The first page read, "Next steps." I didn't write anything beneath it. Not yet. Instead, I let my gaze drift back to that framed form. Darren's name still visible under the signature line. Poor bastard thought he was putting me in my place. He did. He just didn't realize where that place was. Internal monologue. They buried me in the basement. They just forgot who built the foundation.